With Haaland and Saka blanking, Bruno Fernandes with that red card and Cole Palmer bagging 4 goals, it was a roller coaster game week 6 which hasn't ended yet, but in today's video we need to take a look at my transfer plans going into game week 7, in particular whether I need to activate my wildcard tonight off the back of a tricky game week 6. So as always, make sure you drop a like on the video if you are looking forward to it and you want to watch how bad I got on. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you smash that subscribe button. Enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, we need to take a look at how game week 6 went for my team. I am all out for 44 points, so it was a tricky game week to say the least. Of course, game week 6 hasn't finished yet. Semenyo still to play. I'm praying he doesn't do anything. I apologise to those that wildcarded him in, but his ownership is still around 10%, so I don't really see my overall rank changing that much. So 44 points, an overall rank of 1.3 million pretty much. Prior to game week 6, I was just below 1 million, so I will take it. In a week where loads of managers activated their wildcard and I decided not to do so, my one free transfer 5 minutes before the deadline being Lewis Hall to Rico Lewis. I spoke about if we were to get the news that he was going to be starting for Man City, I felt like it was too good of an opportunity not to bring him in, knowing that I would want him for the long term and his price would inevitably rise. Even though it did mean me benching the 7 points of Robinson, I don't regret the transfer, as I do think it will be a move that I benefit from in game week 7 in particular. So take a look at the team. Yes, it was a rough game week, but equally, it could have been a great game week. Henderson, the least I say, the better regarding him. Gave me so much hope in game week 5 with that clean sheet against Man United, only to get the 1-pointer in game week 6. I am looking forward to finally parting ways with him eventually. Now, in terms of the defenders, Rico Lewis was a bit of a coverage pick in terms of managers going for him on a wild card. I felt like me bringing him in at least gave myself some exposure to that Man City clean sheet if it was to happen. But the double Liverpool defence basically was my make or break this game week. While managers were going for double Arsenal defence, and I thought that was a great move, I equally felt that Liverpool will be massively overlooked. Still a brilliant defence, and also both of these offering fantastic attacking potential. Now, if anyone watched that game against Wolves, the goal that Wolves scored was calamitous from Liverpool. And on another day, we pick up double digits for both Robertson and Trent, because anybody that watched that game, Robertson put on a cross for Szoboszlai 2 yards out that he missed. In another world, we get the clean sheet for both and I get an assist for Robertson alongside bonus points, and we're walking away with a green arrow. But that is part and parcel of FPL. We can't control the outcomes and it is what it is. On another day, we get huge returns. In terms of the midfielders, this is where I was really happy with the fact that I stuck to my guns. I spoke about how I didn't feel like Diogo Jota was a desperate sell because he had limited minutes midweek, which meant that I thought his minutes were going to be good this weekend, and he thankfully repaid my loyalty with an 8-point haul. Very much differential points there, and Morgan Rogers continues to tick over nicely with those 7 points. Did go off early with a slight hamstring problem, so we need to monitor that situation, because that will be a real problem for my team if he is to be out for game week 7. But again, we can reassess that with the Champions League midweek. Saka with a 3-pointer. Weirdly, the bonus points got taken off him really late on, is what it is. And Eze and Smith Rowe. Eze, the one really frustrating, because of course, Mbeumo, who is slightly more expensive, really showing why I probably should have gone to Mbeumo earlier on. But Eze is a player we definitely need to address going into game week 7. And finally, the front two. Haaland with the captaincy. I was more than happy with putting the captaincy on him. Is what it is. He's been a delight to be opening 5 game weeks. And Ollie Watkins. This was the other one. When I was looking at game week 6 in isolation, yes, Havertz and Solanke both scored late on in their games, but I looked at Watkins and felt this was a great fixture and another opportunity to have a differential player against those managers that activated the wildcard. And again, the 11-pointer just reminding us what an unbelievable FPL option he is. So 44 points. I'm actually okay with this game week considering I didn't activate the wildcard. Let's take a look at some of the underlying numbers for game week 6 in isolation, and then my team and my transfer plans. But let me know in the comments, how many points did you score? And of course, did you activate your wildcard? So going into game week 7, I think it's always beneficial to take a look back at the previous game week and have a look at those players that are naturally being bought. Cole Palmer, for example, the most bought player already going into game week 7. I think he will get close to 1 million transfers before we get to that Saturday deadline. People McNeil as well, very highly owned going into game week 7 off the back of their performance in game week 6. And one game week in isolation, very difficult to come to any conclusions. But I do just want to take a look at those players specifically to see whether the numbers that they're putting up are actually numbers that we could see going forward. Now, Cole Palmer, for example, is a player that regardless of what these numbers are going to be in game week 6, we need to remember this is one of the best midfielders in the league. So he has the ability of doing this in any single given game week. We've seen it already. In game week 2, he gave us a pre-warning against Wolves with that 17-pointer. He's just one-upped himself with a 25-point haul. Now, those new managers that are bringing him in, please just remember, this isn't going to happen every single game week. But the numbers that he put up in this game are still fantastic. 7 shots, 5 of those on target, 4 attempted assists, 2.2 XG, 0.97 expected assists. And you can see at the very end here, this is all taken from a Fantasy Football Fix. 25 points. Realistically, there isn't going to be many players out there that actually have an expected FPL points of 25. That would be crazy. But 19.21 expected FPL points in one single game is absolutely ridiculous, especially when we take into account one of those being a penalty, of course, so that has obviously skewed the XG a little bit, and one of those being a long-range free kick, which in another world is probably a 0.05 expected goals, if not less. These numbers are absolutely ridiculous. And as I mentioned, in terms of Cole Palmer, his fixtures coming up, yes, they do get slightly more difficult from game week 8 onwards, but we know that his minutes are going to be great. We know that his numbers are always good in a Chelsea shirt, pretty much. Not to this level, we do need to remember, but anybody that's bringing Cole Palmer in, I cannot argue it at all. The only things we need to remember is that we're coming into a tricky run of fixtures of Chelsea after game week 7, and he just isn't going to score 4 goals each and every week. But the numbers are unbelievable. We know that we have over a year's worth of information on him to know that he can deliver in any fixture. I have no arguments with managers going there for him. Now, the next one that we do need to take a look at is going to be McNeil. Now, this is a player that is ticking over very nicely this season. In terms of game week 6 in isolation, 15-point haul, but an expected FPL points of 7.16. We remember, long-range effort, the worldie that he did score means that he isn't scoring that each and every week. I don't care how good his form is. 0.32 expected goals, 0.05 expected assists. Some would argue this was a lucky return of 15 points, but McNeil this season is putting up fantastic numbers. In terms of his attempted assists, over the course of the season, he is right up there as one of the best. I don't think we're necessarily looking at a goal scorer each and every week for Everton, but I do think we're looking at more of a chance creator. So it slightly goes against the narrative of McNeil, where in game week 6, he scored 2 goals. He was fantastic, but I actually do think he is going to continue to actually get more of his points in assists in this Everton team. And at 5.5 million, anybody that's maybe looking at a budget enabler in their teams to move away from someone like a Smith Rowe, I think McNeil is actually a fantastic option for your teams. And the Everton fixtures long-term are great. So it's a good alternative if managers want to go there. The other one that we need to highlight here is going to be both Martinelli and Trossard. Now, Martinelli playing on the left wing, Trossard operating more in a number 10 role behind Kai Havertz. The big warning sign that I need to put out for managers here is that if you are looking to buy one of Martinelli or Trossard, we need to remember Merino, their new signing, will be integrated in the team soon. We don't know whether that's going to impact Trossard or Martinelli. So you are buying a rotation risk longer term. Both at 6.9 million. Obviously here Trossard putting up the real big numbers with XG 1.53. And the shots, very similar, 5 for Martinelli, 4 for Trossard. For me, if I had to buy one right now, it probably would be more Trossard than that of Martinelli, because I think he's a bit more versatile in his selection in the team. I think somebody like a Sterling could eat away at the minutes of Martinelli longer term in this side, whereas Trossard can play off the left, he can play in the 10 while those players are injured. Trossard would be the pick for me at 6.9 million if you are looking for a differential in game week 7. But again, we need to remember Champions League football is happening this week, and whoever gets selected in that game, if it's both, makes it a little bit more difficult for selection on the weekend. The final player that I did want to raise a little bit of a discussion about, because we're going to be taking a look at Spurs assets in a minute in isolation, is going to be Delap at Ipswich. 5.5 million forward. Guaranteed minutes in this Ipswich team, coming into great fixtures for Ipswich. 3 shots in this game, 0.79 expected goals, 8.18 expected FPL points. I think this guy's going to tick over really nicely this season. His numbers in general in an Ipswich shirt have been fantastic. Yes, we don't know a load about him, but being in the Man City Academy, coming over, I do think he has a bit of pedigree, he has a bit about him, physical specimen. I do think Delap could tick over really nicely in this Ipswich team. The one thing we need to remember, of course, is it is Ipswich. I think the chances they create are going to be not as high volume as that of other players, maybe a Calvert-Lewin and Everton team, but if you're looking for a differential forward, I do think Delap is a great option. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Who actually caught your eye in Game Week 6? Now let's take a look at my Game Week 7 transfer plans. So take a look at my Game Week 7 transfer plans. Here's how the team is looking without any transfers made. 0 in the bank is a little bit of a concern. Hall to Lewis last week used everything I had available. Got nothing left. So 0 in the bank is a problem in terms of flexibility with this team. It means that a -4 would have to be made to really shake up the team. So the first question they have to ask ourselves is, does this team require a wild card? And I'm going to say no. The big reason being is the team, I knew I was coming into this situation, coming into Game Week 7 last week. So if I really felt this team needed a wild card, I should have just done it with the masses in Game Week 6. I knew what I was getting myself into in Game Week 7. So for that reason, I'm not going to be looking to use my wild card. On the face of it, yes, I am missing out on a few things. I don't have any Arsenal defensive coverage, which isn't ideal. I don't have some of those mid-price midfielders that other managers have, like a Semenyo or a Brian Mbeumo. And of course, I don't have some of the popular forwards in the game. But when I take a look at someone like an Ollie Watkins, I spoke about it in last week's video. I looked at Ipswich away and in particular Man United at home as 2 fixtures that I absolutely could see him returning in. And off the back of Game Week 6, what we saw with Man United, I don't think that's changed my mind at all. I think Ollie Watkins remains a brilliant option for Game Week 7 at home against Man United. So the team itself isn't terrible, but I do think there are problems afoot. We need to remember the big thing, do not be making early transfers because we have Champions League football back. That's going to include, of my team, Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool. So there is going to be problems that are naturally going to happen. And of course, Aston Villa during the week, they have big games, injuries could happen. All it's going to take for my team is going to be a Liverpool defensive injury, Diogo Jota to play 90 and be a massive doubt for the weekend, an injury for Rodgers, of course, he went off early. And then, of course, this team will require a wild card because I do not have a bench in this team at all. I only have Robinson that can help me out. So a wild card might happen if we do have big issues on the back of Champions League football. But right now, I need to look at my team and say to myself, what truly needs to be done to improve it in Game Week 7? Because Game Week 8 is actually a wildcard window that we could go for. And of course, we will cover that off in a future video this week. So on the face of it, I'm not going to look at Jota right now as a problem player until we have those Champions League minutes. I think the real issue right now is going to be the 5th midfielder, Smith Rowe away against Man City. I know Fulham are doing well this year, but I really don't like that. So one move that we could do is look to downgrade Smith Rowe to someone like a McNeil. We spoke about it in the stats section. I'm not really expecting McNeil to continue with his goal scoring threat, but I do think his overall game is really good at 5.5 million. So Smith Rowe to someone like a McNeil is a good option. But the one thing as well that I'm a little bit annoyed about is going to be Eze. Now, yes, his numbers are always okay, but home against Liverpool isn't ideal, especially for somebody like myself who has double Liverpool defence. It just never looks good in that situation. So with no money in the bank, I need to be a little bit creative if I was to move out someone like an Eze. I will be looking at some Spurs midfielders, which we're going to cover off next because I am quite intrigued by them. But Eze out is very, very tempting. The only problem with that is it doesn't really fix the Game Week 7 team. While I would love to get rid of Eze and bring in a more exciting player, I still am stuck with Smith Rowe. I'm stuck with the minutes risk of Diogo Jota. I'm stuck with a potentially injured Rodgers. So for that reason, even though I would love to sell Eze, I need to see a little bit from the weekend to understand whether I need to bring in a Tottenham player desperately. So let's take a look at some Spurs players. But right now, based on this, I think I need to prioritise Smith Rowe rather than selling an Eze. But let's see what these Spurs players have in store for me. So first and foremost, we need to put it out there. Let's not jump the gun on Spurs. They obviously played against a woeful Man United team and down to 10 men for a large majority of that game. So we can't jump to conclusions and say to ourselves, oh my God, Spurs have to be bought. But it is worth noting that Spurs, although we've had an indifferent start to the season in terms of actual points, they've actually been good this season. The numbers have been consistent. Their team selection has been pretty consistent. So I think we can buy Spurs players in the knowledge that we know roughly what the starting 11 is going to be. And we also know what we're kind of getting from certain players. So we'll take a look at the numbers right now. These are per 90 minutes. The only caveat that I need to say is that we are seeing a slight positional change for Kulusevski. Previously, he was playing out on the right wing as a replacement for someone like a Brennan Johnson, but he is now coming into this dual 10 role alongside Maddison, which I actually think really elevates Kulusevski as an FPL option. And we've seen it in interviews that this is where Kulusevski really wants to play. So we are getting a player here that is playing in his natural position, and he has been the standout player for Spurs this season. Kulusevski, he has been magnificent. So slight price differences here. 6.2 million for Kulusevski, 6.4 for Johnson, 7.5 for Maddison. So we do need to take that into consideration. If I want to get Maddison in, that would have to be for Diogo Jota, or we would have to do a -4 to move away from someone like an Eze. So taking a look at the underlying numbers for all of these players, kicking things off with Maddison here. XG per 90, 0.36, not the best, but 0.35 expected assists. He always has these kind of underlying numbers. He's good in the goal scoring department. He's good in the creativity department. And I think you pay for what you get with Maddison. I think his minutes are going to be fantastic. His shot volume's not too bad at 2.23, but only 1.67 in the box isn't incredible. I think Maddison is very much a purple patch player. And while he's on it, I think this is the time to get him if you do really want to bring him in. Obviously 6.16 expected FPL points. He's always going to be more of a well-rounded asset. But at 7.5 million, the big question we need to ask ourselves is, are the other two who are $1 million or more cheaper doing similar things? And that brings ourselves up to Johnson. Now, Johnson is a player that I really don't like. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't rate him. But from an FPL perspective, at 6.4 million, playing in this Ange team out on that right-hand side, we cannot ignore these numbers. 3.79 shots per 90 is fantastic. And the big thing for me is all of those shots are coming in the box. So he's getting himself into goal scoring opportunities, whereas other people like Maddison are maybe taking more long shot range shots that aren't necessarily going to equate to goals. And we can see this as a consistent trend from Johnson. All of the shots in the box, 0.5 XG per 90 is fantastic. And we're seeing it XA, is expected assists, really low down. But I actually really like that. That means that what we're getting is more creativity from Kulusevski and Maddison and more of a goal scorer in Brennan Johnson. And if at 6.4 million I can get the goal scoring midfielder, that's exactly what I want. So Johnson is really catching my eye. Right now, I actually do prefer him to that of Maddison just because of that 1 million price saving. And you're basically getting the goal scorer in the team. Finally, Kulusevski, slightly cheaper, a player that I absolutely rate more than Johnson. In terms of the numbers, shot volume's decent at 2.26, but again, the shots are much less than that of Johnson in the box. 4.11 attempted assists, so he is really the creative monster in this team. And when you look at these numbers, you do ask yourself, this is probably just a cheaper Maddison. So for that reason, I do prefer Kulusevski over James Maddison. I would argue Kulusevski's minutes are going to be better than that of Brennan Johnson's as well. And I feel like he's only going to get better with his numbers while he plays in this number 10 role. But right now, I do think both of these are viable FPL options. And I wouldn't be complaining about getting either of these in our teams. I think right now I would actually be a bit more tempted to try and get the goal scorer in Brennan Johnson. So Johnson's the one on my radar for now. The big question I need to ask myself is he a player to bring in for game week 7? Now, bringing up the fixtures right now for Spurs, you can see, obviously in game week 7, they are away against Brighton, but then they have West Ham, Palace, Villa, Ipswich, Man City. While Brighton were woeful in game week 6 against Chelsea, I don't know whether ripping up my team to bring in them for this game week is the right time. with game week 8 a potential wild card for me, I feel like what I want to do is maybe hold off on Spurs for one more week, get another game week's worth of information with them playing this system of Kulusevski in the 10, Johnson out on the right and Maddison floating around. One more game week worth of information, and then in game week 8, allow myself to maybe have the right Spurs player as opposed to jumping the gun off the back of one game week against Man United. So Johnson's the man for me, but I think I might hold off on Spurs for one more game week. So finally, I just wanted to show you a few different variations that I'm considering for game week 7 as part of my transfer plans. Now, as I mentioned, I still have the wild card in the back pocket. Game week 8 is absolutely a viable move. So we need to take a look at what we can do. Now, first and foremost, I need to say this. I just can't bring Cole Palmer into this team. I have no real easy way of getting him, and the only cash cow midfielder I have in my team is going to be Bukayo Saka, and Southampton at home is not a fixture that I'm even considering selling Bukayo Saka to bring in someone like a Cole Palmer who has a more difficult fixture at home against Nottingham Forest. I do not think that's going to be an easy game for them. So there's a few different variations that we can do with the team. Firstly, if we get all of the players past fair, I could just roll the transfer, but I don't think this team is that strong, to be honest with you. So the first situation that we could do is that we just get rid of Smith Rowe. I don't love it, and I also don't love bringing in McNeil, but I feel like it does bring in a better player for game week 7. And moving into game week 8, we also still have him then for away against Ipswich, which is absolutely fine. And again, the team doesn't look horrendous for game week 8, but we also have the wild card in the back pocket if other issues do arise. So that is one consideration, and it also would mean it frees up some money in the bank for me at 0.1 million. But it isn't an exciting move, and I think it still gives me a little bit of issues with Diogo Jota and Morgan Rogers if we are having slight concerns about them in the game week. The next option, if we were to get Jota as a major risk for the weekend, I don't think I can really bring in anybody else other than Bryan Mbeumo. So if we get the news that Jota is a massive rotation risk off the back of the Champions League, I think I just have to bite the bullet. I do Jota to Mbeumo, I play Smith Rowe against Man City and just accept what will be with the team. Not ideal, but again, this game week is going to be a tricky one. I would love to obviously have a good game week, but Jota would be the main priority and Mbeumo just has to be the transfer in because the fixture's great, the long-term fixtures are great for him. And I don't think bringing in a Spurs midfielder over Mbeumo makes a lot of sense to me. It's a talisman penalty taker. And going into game week 8, obviously away against Man United looks bad, but is it that bad for Mbeumo? Probably not. So that would be my Jota contingency plan. Now, of course, we always need to have a YOLO move, a crazy move in the back pocket if we really do need to do so. Now, this is going to require me selling Trent. Now, that makes not a lot of sense, but with somebody like myself who has double Liverpool defence, I have double exposure, so I can afford to get rid of one of those if I want to. Now, the only reason why I'm considering potentially selling Trent is that this period here isn't fantastic for Liverpool. And even though Trent can score in any game week, I don't know whether the Liverpool defence will keep clean sheets over that period. And he is a brilliant cash cow for my team. So one move that we could do is, and again, I told you it's a bit maverick, is doing Trent to Vardial, then getting rid of Smith Rowe and bringing in, I said I didn't want to, but someone like a Brennan Johnson ahead of the game. And then if we do get the news, as I mentioned, that Jota is a concern, then we can do Diogo Jota to Bryan Mbeumo as part of a combination. That's a -8. Not ideal, but it does bring me in a team like this, which I do think is quite favourable for the game week. But on the other hand, if Mbeumo, for example, if Jota isn't a rotation risk, then I absolutely could just leave the team like this. As part of a -4, I've brought in double Man City, I've brought in Brennan Johnson, who I do think is a good pick long term. Or if we do have slight concerns about other players, Eze could come out of my team and I could easily bring in someone like a Bryan Mbeumo. What I'm trying to say is that if I am looking, sorry, I can't bring in Eze, so it would have to be Diogo Jota. But what I'm trying to say is that a points hit isn't off the cards for me this week. Because I have double exposure for Liverpool and a wild card in my back pocket, I don't actually hate the idea of going without Trent for a couple of weeks if I need to, knowing that I could bring him straight back in. Whereas other managers that wildcarded in game week 6 kind of had to include Trent in their teams, because if they didn't and he went off, How do you go back there? So those are a few thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. For me, I'm just going to chill for a few days, let the Champions League happen, and then reassess on my team when we get there. Yes, guys, okay, that's going to wrap up today's Game Week 7 Transfer Plans video. I really hope it provided some value. Let me know in the comment section if you have any questions. Of course, I'll answer them over the next 24 hours. And of course, let me know how you got on. Did you beat my magnificent 44 points? I'm sure you did. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like and smash that subscribe button. It's always massively appreciated. And I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Take care. Cheers.